Hi, my name is Reed Silverne. The name of the show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride, because I'm a federal worker and proud of it. And I have today, actually, it's not really today, but today for me is the 21st of December. You'll be watching this on the 23rd, Sunday, or the 25th. And you might be watching it the following week. Because I'm not going to be doing the show next week. I'll be on vacation. Of course, there's big stuff coming up, and a lot of people ask me, Reed, why don't you talk more about politics? And I'm going to have to talk about politics because we have an election year. And the election year is really coming to a head because on January 3rd, the Iowa caucuses are going to be followed, I think, by the following Tuesday, by the first primary over in New Hampshire. So we're really deep in the middle of the political season, and the politicians are going after each other hot and heavy. And one of my problems is that I've done this show during the 2000, well, really at the beginning of it, 1996 and so on and so forth. 2004 I was in Europe, so I wasn't doing the show during then, and of course on the off seasons as well, 2006 and so on and so forth. And what I found out is that I'm notorious at talking about what everybody thinks at the moment, because that's what I get to read in the paper, and then not really knowing a darn thing about who's really going to win or what's going on. When you have a delay, like we do over here, everything can change, and change very, very quickly. So I do the show on Friday. I'm doing the show Friday, December 21st. I'm not going to probably do another show until January 4th, and that'll be the day after the Iowa caucus. So if I talk about the Iowa caucus, I'm going to say so-and-so, probably Huckabee, just doing great, looking great at the polls, looking great at the debates, ingenious ad, basically wishing the people of Iowa, and let me point at Iowa right here in the middle of the country, wishing them a Merry Christmas and saying that the other politicians are going to run negative ads and so on and so forth. But I have one thing to say to the people of Iowa: Merry Christmas. Doesn't get better than that. That, I think, is a stroke of genius. It's probably going to be one of the great ad campaigns of all history. Would be terrible if he loses and then fizzles out and that's the end of his campaign. But who knows what's going to happen. Again, I read about it, and so-and-so's ahead, and so-and-so's behind, and so-and-so messed up, and I'll talk about it, and then by Tuesday, the individual I think is going to win will have dropped out of the race. As a matter of fact, one did. Tom Tancredo, the anti-immigrant candidate, is out. But it seems like, I guess, his message has been adopted by some of the other candidates. The Democratic side, Hillary sounds like she's been dropping, and Obama sounds like he's been rising. Is it really true? What'll happen? Both of them seem to have good organizations in Iowa. I don't know who's going to win. I have my own personal fears about Obama. I don't think he's strong enough in foreign policy. I'm not sure he's pro-military enough, and of course I am pro-military. Basically he's always been against the Iraq War, which shows that he's pretty prescient. But on the other hand, we're there. Petraeus is out there. The casualties are down a little bit, at least the casualties against Americans. The suicide bombings and so on and so forth are still going up, but not really in Baghdad, which is what Petraeus' strategy was to control. So cut and run, leave, up and set a date. Is that the right thing to do now? I personally don't think so, but then again, a lot of the people watching my show, and I've talked with people, say, I'm sick of it, let's get out, and so on and so forth. And a year ago, when we appeared to be losing, I said, we either have to go in here, fire Rumsfeld, and I did say that over and over again, and either win this thing or leave. And that was my position then. We clearly haven't won this thing yet, but it's not impossible that we can win this thing, at least in the sense of defeating Al-Qaeda in Iraq. When it comes to putting Shiites in charge of Iraq, here's Iraq over here, here's Iran. Iran is the largest Shiite state, very hostile to American interests. And here's Iraq over here, and this whole southern part is Shiite, including 60% of the population. Well, you know, if you put the people of a country in charge, and 60% of those people are Shiites, you're going to end up with a Shiite government, and it's going to be friendly to Iran and hostile to America eventually. So if our aim is having everything just be pro-American and so on and so forth, or having an American-dominated government, it's not going to happen. If our aim is to defeat Al-Qaeda in Iraq and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, as opposed to end up with everybody just loving us and hating everybody else, we can do that. We can win that. And Al-Qaeda has done a lot of work for us, basically by blowing up everybody who they feel is against them, including Sunnis, and they just blew up or tried to blow up the Pakistani, there's Pakistan over here, Minister of the Interior, who's been organizing groups against the Taliban and so on and so forth. They blew up a mosque during Eid. Eid is the end of Ramadan and is basically about as close to Christmas as Muslims are going to get. It's a time of feasting and gift giving and family lovey-doveyness and so on and so forth. And to go in there and blow up Sunni Muslims in a mosque is not the kind of thing that's going to make you popular anywhere in the world. So if we're out to defeat Al-Qaeda, we can do that. If we're out to make Iraq over in our image, we're going to lose. We should get out. So right now, it seems like Petraeus has a policy, excuse me, of trying to defeat Al-Qaeda in Iraq by bringing Sunnis, Sunni sheikhs that had been against us, that fought against us the first phase of the war, and having them fight Al-Qaeda, who wants to kill them anyway, create a extremely grim, totalitarian, uber unfriendly Sharia Islamic regime where dancing and music and laughing and loving are completely suppressed, which they did in Afghanistan under the Taliban. Most people, and most people with a culture, and the Iraqis have a culture, and they have a sense of fun, they have music, and they have dancing, are going to oppose it, and they're definitely going to oppose it when they start blowing up people in mosques. Their own people in their own Sunni mosque, which is what Al-Qaeda did. So I think it's winnable, and back to my real subject, which is the election. Obama is somewhat popular, especially in the left wing of the Democratic Party, and I think that he's pretty much, even if he surrounds himself by realpolitik foreign policy experts, he's going to have boxed himself into a position to get out at all costs, and I think that might be the wrong thing to do. And I think that Al-Qaeda would come back, they would bring a lot of foreign fighters in there, and they would start suicide bombing all the people that joined us. So I'm a little worried about him. I don't know how pragmatic he is. I don't know if he has the capacity for pragmatism. If he does, then all the more power to him. If he doesn't, then I think we're going to have a lot of trouble. Hillary, on the other hand, I think that the Clinton regime will be the Clinton regime. It'll be the same regime, surrounded by the same people, except perhaps not Sandy Berger, who had his clearance revoked. I think that it'll be surrounded by pretty much the same people that balanced the budget, and the same people that won in Kosovo. I don't think that they're irresponsible, even though they are Democrats, and I think there are people that would probably run a responsible foreign policy. I think that they would say, well, we want to get out, and then when things happened, and they'll just leave them in, they'll ask for more money and so on and so forth, and they'll let the military do what it needs to do in order to not lose that war. So that's what I think the Clintons will do. On the Republican side, they all want to cut taxes. Cut taxes, cut taxes. I'm very, very worried about that. Anybody who's taken Economics 101 knows that when you're in a war, the only way to prevent inflation is to pay for the war as you go. And to pay for the war as you go means to not have a government deficit. That's even more important now that we have an incredible, unbelievable trade deficit with China, $250 million a year with one country alone, the country of China. $500 billion deficit with the rest of the world. We can't keep that and have a government deficit at the same time and maintain our position in the world and our economy. It's got to cause inflation. It's already causing inflation in the sense that our currency has gone down and everything that's imported has gone up, with the exception, oddly enough, of goods from China. Because China has pegged their currency to the dollar, and therefore when the dollar goes down against the euro, the Chinese yuan goes down along with the dollar. What's the result? If the Europeans let them sell them goods, now it's even cheaper. Chinese goods are even cheaper in Europe. So the Chinese have very smart policy going. It's undermining us. On the other hand, the Chinese come back and they invest in our businesses and in our treasuries to try to keep us going because, for good or ill, China has 1.25 billion people. Their population is not going up very fast. They have a low birth rate because through totalitarian means, they basically won't let people have more than one child. But the result is that about 25 to 50 million people a year are moving from the countryside in China to the cities, and they'll either have to make jobs for those people or there's going to be a revolution, one or the other. And the Chinese government understands that. They realize that they don't really have a ideology. There's no sense of popularity at all because there's no elections. There's no real legitimacy outside of the Communist Party. And the Communist Party is no longer communist. It's capitalist. So it's a capitalist Communist Party, and they have to make 25 to 50 million jobs a year. The only way they can do that is to dump goods on the rest of the world. And that's what they're doing. So the Chinese just spent $5 billion buying a stake of Merrill Lynch, which has announced that it lost, what was it? I think a total of $10 billion, a 9.3 increase in the loss that they had already announced. So it's over a $10 billion increase. And the Chinese are basically bailing out American banks in order to keep the credit system going. And so is the Fed, is lowering interest rates. But the Fed can't lower interest rates ad infinitum because the dollar is no longer the world's reserve currency. So what do I think is going to happen in Iowa? Well, you know, as of December 21st, it looks like that there's a dead heat between Clinton and Obama. And Huckabee's going to win the Republican side. However, between now and January 3rd, anything can happen. Huckabee can disappear. Somebody else can just come out of nowhere, like John McCain. Who knows what will happen? And Huckabee sounds like, as of December 21st, and again, I can only read the paper that I have in front of me, it looks like he's doing very well in New Hampshire, and that he's caught up with Romney. Let's see if I can pin it down here. Here's Cape Cod, and right next to it, right about there, is New Hampshire. It's right next to and just due north of Massachusetts. And usually, if you have a candidate that's from New England, they do very, very well in New Hampshire because they're well known. It just happens that the people in the southern part of New Hampshire, some of those are actually suburbs of Boston, and people actually commute all the way down to Boston. They get some Boston TV stations, so they hear about the governor of Massachusetts all day long. Similarly, Obama is from Illinois. Iowa is right across the river from Illinois. As a matter of fact, I remember taking classes at Rock Island, Illinois, and right across the river from Rock Island, Illinois is a city in Iowa. And that's the one and only time I've been to Iowa. I remember going to Grant Woods Museum there. So they get a lot of the TV and a lot of the media from Illinois. So they should be very, very familiar with Obama and with Illinois politicians. So Midwestern politicians do well in Iowa, and in New Hampshire, New England politicians are favored. But Giuliani is familiar with that area, and they're familiar with him, so on and so forth, because they're all East Coast. So what's going to happen? I don't absolutely know. I do know that on January 3rd, I'll come back, and the caucus, or January 4th, the caucus will be over, and I'll be talking about that. But who's going to win? Don't listen to me. The conventional wisdom as of December 21st is a dead heat between Clinton and Obama, with Clinton having been leading and going down, Obama having been behind and coming back up. That could just turn around. For all we know, in a week, Clinton could be 20 points ahead, and people could be wondering whatever happened to Obama. Or Obama could be 20 points ahead, and everybody will be counting Clinton out for the whole rest of the election. It's hard to say. They both have a lot of money, and they both have a section of the party behind him. Obama has the real liberal anti-war wing of the party. Clinton has the old-time civil rights leaders and the old-time kind of standard Democratic politicians behind her. It's hard to say which of those factions are more powerful, and which of those factions are able to, if either party does win, and I know there's a lot of other candidates out there in the Democratic side that personally, I've listened to, Biden and Dodd and so on and so forth, and who I'm familiar with because I've seen them in the Senate and I've, followed politics about them. But Richardson's another case. He's a governor of New Mexico and also an ex-ambassador of the UN and Secretary of the Energy. So it's hard to say, who's going to be there, but I think those other folks just don't have a chance. I think that they just didn't raise enough money. And the way the election season is run this year, you're going to need a lot of money very, very quickly. That's why, and I really, really thought, I had to admit, if you talked to me or if I did the show 6 months ago, I would have said, look, whoever wins the money primary in September or October of 2007 is going to win the election because there's the 3 early primaries. Well, the first is a caucus, that's Iowa, and then there's the first primary is New Hampshire, and that's early January, and then comes South Carolina, which is the first one in the South, and they had to move theirs up because Florida has an unrecognized, but it will be accepted primary early in January too, and then by February 5th, just about half of the voters in half of the states will have a tsunami. It's a Super Tuesday and a Tsunami Tuesday. I get mixed up which is which. But by the mid-March, it's all over. So it's just primary after primary after primary after primary, and it's February 5th is California and a bunch of other big states. So you can't just go retail politics and just show up at town meetings, get covered in the local paper, and win those primaries. You have to be on TV, and you have to have ads on TV. And ads on TV cost a lot of money. So I had predicted earlier, and it's about the only thing I was right about, but I was wrong about the person. Basically, I said that I didn't think when Romney and Giuliani were the front runners on the Republican side, I said, look, I just don't think a party that's been dominated by evangelicals and social conservatives are going to nominate Giuliani, who's basically liberal on abortion, and even though he's tough on the military and tough on terrorism, so on and so forth, and fiscal conservative, I just didn't think that he could win. And then Romney's an ex-governor of Massachusetts. He also, to gain that Massachusetts Republican vote, which is pretty liberal, he had to at least appear to be socially liberal, even though that he's a Mormon. And now he's backpedaling, and he's always been against abortion and all this other stuff. But I'm just not sure that he's going to get believed. So I always thought that they were in trouble. Giuliani was way ahead. Romney was was catching up behind him, putting a lot of his own money in. And at that time, they were talking about Fred Thompson, who was playing a game where he wasn't really running, but he really was, and he didn't put in for it officially. And Fred Thompson sputtered out, but Huckabee, who's been in there for a long time, Brownback collapsed and he quit. But Huckabee has come out of nowhere, and he's very personable. He has the right credentials, I guess, to get nominated in the Republican Party. And on top of that, he has some, I'm not like everybody else kind of thing. He just criticized Bush as being arrogant in foreign policy. And he basically said, look, as governor of Arkansas, I educated illegal aliens' kids, and I'm proud of it because I didn't want them running around the streets. So basically, he comes off sounding all reasonable to the non-social conservatives, and yet, he's very folksy, and he can quote the Bible off the top of his head. He can get away with an ad that just wishes everybody in Iowa Merry Christmas. I don't want to get negative. I don't like it when people do, but Merry Christmas, and get away with an ad like that. So I think that Huckabee has a good chance. I don't know that he's going to win. He could sputter out. He's gaining a lot of money. And then, of course, there's Ron Paul, who's just an outright old-style libertarian coming from the far left-right, who thinks that everybody in the military should be pulled out of every country in the world, and that we should basically completely disarm, that our entire military should become a border patrol, and we should end Social Security and all this other stuff. So legalize pot and all the other things that he wants. So he's coming out of nowhere. He's not really doing that well in the polls, but he's raising millions and millions of dollars, and a lot of people want to run him and want to persuade him to run as a third-party candidate, which could turn 2008 into a scenario like 1992 when Perot was out there and took off some of the Republican vote and allowed the Clintons to get in there. So we don't know what's going to happen. My name is Reed Silverne. The name of this show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker and proud of it. This show's on Sundays, and I believe it's at 1 o'clock, and on Tuesdays, I believe it's 6 or 7. You'll have to check accesstucson.com. And thank you very, very much for watching.